Okay, so you know that feeling. You're just swimming in information, news, opinions.
Everywhere.
But you still feel like there are these deeper questions underneath it all. The ones that really make you stop and think, why are we here? What's the point?
Yeah, the really fundamental stuff. That's the territory we're looking at today.
Right. We're digging into excerpts from a text called Answers to the Eternal Questions.
And it tackles exactly that, like the title says. Humanity's biggest questions about, well, everything. Existence, the universe, suffering.
And ultimately, liberation, too.
Exactly.
So think of this maybe as a streamlined way to start grappling with these huge ideas. Our goal isn't really to hand you all the answers.
No, that's a whole other journey.
But more to pull out the main questions the source itself raises. And I guess the basic framework it suggests for how we might even start thinking about them.
It's about getting a clear starting point, really. A way to organize these massive concepts so you don't feel completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, lost in the weeds. So let me just ask you listening. Have you ever looked up at the stars and just wondered, how did all this get here?
Or wrestled with why there's so much pain and difficulty? It's hard to avoid that one.
Definitely. Or even just had that quiet thought, is real, lasting happiness actually possible for us?
These are precisely the kinds of questions we're going to unpack based on this text.
Okay.
In this source, it actually groups them into 6 main areas, 6 fundamental categories where these big questions tend to cluster.
Right, 6 areas. So what's the first one?
The first big one is God.
Okay. And it's not just asking, does God exist? Is it?
No, it goes deeper. It asks things like, okay, if there is a God, then why is there so much suffering? That's a classic.
The big one.
Yeah, and does this God have like a form, a location, or even if there's this all good, all powerful force, why isn't the world, perfect? Why the hardship?
Those are definitely heavy hitters to start with.
They are. And then the focus shifts outwards to the universe.
The cosmos itself.
Right. The text prompts us to think about its origins. When did it start? How? Was there like a Big Bang equivalent in their view?
And what about beyond what we can see?
Exactly. Is our universe the only one? Could there be others? And what are the underlying rules, the laws governing it all? And, does it end?
It really taps into that innate human curiosity about, well, everything out there.
Absolutely. Then, from the cosmic scale, it zooms in a bit, though still pretty vast living beings.
Us and everything else alive.
Yep. Where did life on Earth actually come from? And then those perennial questions. What happens when we die?
Always a big one.
And the text brings up something interesting, especially now with the population growing so much. Where do all these, new souls or new lives come from? If you think in terms of rebirth or reincarnation, it touches on those concepts too.
Interesting. Which I suppose leads directly into the next area, suffering.
Naturally. And this one, I think, is probably the most universal. Everyone gets this.
For sure. Why do we suffer? Physical pain, emotional pain? What's the root cause?
And crucially, can it actually end? Not just temporary fixes, but a real lasting end to suffering. Is that even achievable?
A question I think everyone's asked themselves at some point.
Without a doubt.
So if we can get beyond suffering, what's the goal then? That brings us to liberation.
Precisely. What does that word even mean in this context? True liberation, or maybe enlightenment? Is constant happiness something humans can realistically aim for?
So liberation is like the ultimate state, free from suffering, lasting happiness.
That's how the text frames it, yes. The peak state of being, the ultimate goal.
Okay. And the last one, number 6.
It's the practical side. Practice. Given all these huge questions, what are we supposed to do right now?
Like, what's our purpose day to day? How do we actually get from here, potentially suffering, to there, liberation?
Exactly. How do we make that transition? And the source really emphasizes this point. Finding answers in these 6 areas is, in its view, the main goal for any intelligent thinking person.
It's interesting how it connects that drive to our basic human nature. Like that urge to explore, to understand, even going back to our ancestors facing the unknown.
Despite the fear. It suggests that having unanswered questions is almost an affront to our intelligence.
So we keep searching.
We keep searching until we find answers, and the text implies that real, meaningful answers do exist.
Okay, but where do we often go wrong in this search, according to the text? It mentions a couple of grave mistakes.
It does. The first one, and this might hit home for a lot of people, is assuming that if we can just fix our external world perfectly,
get everything just right,
then we'll finally achieve lasting happiness. The source argues that this constant fiddling with our environment to guarantee joy is, well, fundamentally mistaken.
right? It's like chasing the next thing, the job, the car, the relationship, thinking that will be the final fix, but the feeling fades.
Exactly. It's that hedonic treadmill idea, isn't it? We adapt. The second mistake it highlights is believing that science, on its own, will eventually answer all these deep, eternal questions.
But science tells us so much.
It does, about the physical world, absolutely. The text acknowledges its power. But it argues that the answers to these particular questions might lie beyond what our senses can detect.
Beyond empirical measurement.
Potentially. And therefore, maybe beyond the complete reach of science as we currently practice it.
Okay, this is where it gets really fascinating. If tweaking the outside world isn't the answer, and science alone might not get us there, where does this source say we should look?
The core argument, the central thesis of this text, is self-knowledge.
Self-knowledge.
That's presented as the key, the subject that holds the answers to all these profound questions we've been listing.
So it's a shift. Instead of looking out there.
Look in here. Exactly. The source proposes we redirect our energy, move away from trying to manipulate the external world.
Towards what it calls an internal spiritual pursuit.
Yes, and it clarifies that means a focused inner exploration, not necessarily external rituals or anything. The idea is understanding ourselves at the deepest level is the path.
And this isn't just a casual navel-gazing, right? The text seems to stress it needs structure.
Oh, absolutely. It uses this analogy. Think of it like a postgraduate course.
Okay. Serious study.
Serious study, yeah. Under a competent teacher, it suggests, it's about going deep, not just surface level.
Yeah.
And it's not passive. It requires understanding, sure, but then really mulling it over, reflecting deeply.
So you can't just Google enlightenment and be done.
Probably not. And then, crucially, you have to validate it. Test this knowledge against logic, see if it holds up, see how it applies practically in your own life.
Right. Does it actually work?
Does it make sense? Does it help? And the text is clear. This whole process, understanding, reflecting, validating, takes real sustained effort. It's not a quick fix.
Which leads us to a really compelling point near the end of this section, this apparent contradiction, in Lord Krishna's teachings.
Ah, yes, Arjuna's dilemma. This is fascinating. So Lord Krishna is described as talking about renouncing action.
Stepping back, focusing inward, gaining self-knowledge.
Yeah.
Which fits with what we just discussed.
Right, it aligns perfectly. But then
Arjuna is also being told to be in action, to engage. It sounds like the opposite.
it does seem like a direct conflict. And this leads right into Arjuna's question at the start of chapter 5 in the source material. He basically asks, okay, Krishna, hang on. You praised giving up action, but now you're telling me to act. Which one is it? Tell me clearly. What's actually better for me?
Wow. That is such a relatable question. I mean, anyone thinking about these deep things must feel that tension, right? Between wanting to retreat and understand
Right.
and needing to just live life, do things.
Absolutely. It feels like a very natural point to arrive at after considering the need for inner focus versus the reality of living in the world.
This tension, action versus renunciation.
Mm.
Why do you think the text brings it up so prominently here?
Well, I think it highlights a central challenge, doesn't it? How do you actually integrate this deep internal quest for self-knowledge with, having a job, paying bills, dealing with everyday responsibilities?
How do you pursue the inner path while still walking the outer one?
Exactly. How do you engage in action without losing sight of that deeper goal or getting caught up in the mistakes the text warned about earlier?
Okay, so if we try to sort of wrap up this initial exploration of answers to the eternal questions, what's the main takeaway?
I'd say the source lays out this map of fundamental human questions about God, the universe, life, suffering, liberation, purpose. Questions that have always driven us.
The big six.
The big six. And it proposes that the deepest answers aren't found just by changing our circumstances or through science alone, however powerful those are.
But
through a committed, systematic journey into self-knowledge and inner exploration.
And it leaves us right there thinking about Arjuna's really sharp question. How do we balance that inner quest with the demands of action in the world? It's definitely something to chew on.
It really is. And maybe that leads to a final thought for you listening. Could the actual process of asking these questions, of wrestling with them, be just as important, maybe even more important sometimes, than finding neat final answers?
Like the questioning itself changes you.
Perhaps. How do these huge, maybe unanswerable inquiries shape how you see things, how you act, how you live your life. Something to ponder.
Definitely food for thought. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive today.
Good to explore it.
We hope to continue exploring these kinds of fascinating ideas with you again soon.